I was interested in music from the word go. Next door neighbour had a record player, we didn't. They played me a Colin Kennedy single. I learnt the words, I think I was probably 5 years old. And I just loved the whole idea of music from that point forward. My mother was keen that I should do something like that. I don't know how she knew that was my calling, if you like, but she put me to Highland dancing, of which I was one boy in a group of about 30 girls. I took that as far as medal stage, which meant I was dancing and so on. And I learned to play with very sort of basic ideas, but singing was the whole thing for me from the outset. Primary 3, you know, wheel the piano in and I get to sing, and I'm in my element with that. I got recognised for it in the primary school. That's what he does. And I just never lost that. We were relatively poor as a family because my father took ill when I was about 7 years old. I think he never managed to work again. But I'll never forget sitting in front of the fire in the living room, and he had taken in a garden sieve, taken the lip off it and the mesh and put brown paper on, put it back on again, heated it up to the fire, and he said, "There you go, there's a drum." And when you played it, it had a fantastic sound, but it lasted about 5 minutes and then the paper burst, you know. And we had to improvise. There was a piano in the house. We used to mess with it. No formal learning at all in those days. You just listened and tried to copy, imitate. Yeah, I mean, that was it for me. I just had an appetite and I just wanted to pursue it. So I think I must have been probably about 8 years old when my mother finally got me a guitar. And that was great. There's a funny story about my uncle who was completely non-musical, and I broke my heart because I had broken a string on the guitar, and Inverness at that time was about 2 hours away. There's no way I was going to get another string. And he sympathetically tied a knot in the one that broke and put it back on. Well, that was great, but if you put your hand on the neck, you're liable to rip your fingers apart because there's a knot in it. So, yeah, pretty primitive. With TV, we got to watching the music on TV. We only had 2 channels in those days. We were influenced by coming into the early 60s by all the groups that were on the go at that time. I got together with my mates and we had the dream of forming a group, you know, so we'd find a shed somewhere and have a little session in that, you know. And it was good fun, and we took that, the boys that managed to stay the distance with that, we actually managed to get equipment eventually and form a group. Truth be known, forged the parents' signature on a hire purchase thing and had a job as a message boy and paid it off, but I got myself a drum kit, and so we had a group and we started doing little gigs for peanuts, you know, and again that was great. And I really kept with that right up until my teens. And in my teens, by that time we were playing dance hall, the local dance halls and so on. But you had to play a variety of material because the thing about the Highlands is the people who went to the dances were aged from 9 to 90. And so you had to please all sorts of tastes, and so the repertoire that you played, you didn't work if you tried to specialise in one thing. But we were raised on probably traditional Scottish music, country music, because the Highlands is kind of soft in its stuff, and we didn't really understand jazz or the blues. That wasn't in our culture, so it never came into our repertoire. There was no demand for that type of music. And we played, we tried to emulate the groups of the day, the monkeys that were on TV or whoever, and it was good fun. We improvised a lot. You know, if you wanted to make a case for your carrying your amplifier, which was too heavy, and you needed a shopping trolley to get the wheels, and you know, make a box and sit in the shed and do that. And, you know, that's how we operated. I guess once the group settled down and we became familiar with each other, we tightened the sound up a bit. And the demand for the group widened slightly, so you know, we were getting down as far as Granton-on-Spey eventually. But I suppose for me it was just a matter of being able to sing, and although I wasn't a musician as such, I needed accompaniment. And so I learned to play every instrument that was available to me to a mediocre level, if you like. And I suppose that enabled me to sing. The problem is, of course, that what other members of a group want to do and the material that I was inclined towards often varied, so there was little in-house disputes as to what sort of, and as you're growing up, I guess your tastes change and you're influenced by what you're hearing in the bigger picture. So at one point, with the oil boom in the North Highlands and the construction yards, there was a lot of money flying around, and so there was a lot of socialising going on, and that was an opening for folk singers in pubs, and I became one of those. And that was great, and you know, what I earned from that, I improved the equipment that I had. I got hooked up with a folk group that were at Dunrobin Castle when it was a private school, and I spent a little bit of time with them, and we did some folk singing there, and that was an experience.
Of all the steady home, it's the castle for me. In sunny Scotland, on the northeast coast, in the lovely castle, the local folk, the residents, the family Sutherland, it looks so the sea and the drifted sand.
But it moved on, and the school closed, and I got involved on my own again, and eventually wanted more accompaniment, so tried to form a group again. And we had a couple of groups over the next few years, and it led to eventually what was the basis of what would become Colorado. But en route to that, one of the experiences I had was that I was asked to sing with a Scottish dance band, and I met one what I thought was young person in that Scottish dance band. The rest, to me, were old fogies. You know, it's accordion and piano and country halls across the Highlands. But this guy had a guitar and he could really play it. And so that was my first encounter of what became my lifelong friend, Davy Duff. And Davy, he was an inspiration for me, and we really hit it off from the word go. We had a lot of fun with the Scottish dance band, because although our hearts weren't really in the traditional set dances that the band were playing, the experience was fantastic. Davy was a hairdresser, and he went to Edinburgh, which left me on my own again, and that meant that I went back to folk singing, and decided that I wanted to form a group, and so local boys that had absolutely no experience and were younger than me by about 7 or 8 years, but I knew they were musically inclined. I approached them and we tried putting something together. Funnily enough, I played a bit of tenor sax, and so they were going to think about it, and I ended up actually going off and playing from the folk singing thing into a group in Caithness. I was invited to sing, and it was a full-blown band, ready-made, so I went there, and they were essentially a country show band, the Dynamos, and they asked me to join them permanently on a regular basis, and I wasn't really that keen. So at that point in time, Davy had come back from Edinburgh and was going out folk singing with me, and another guy was playing bass with us, and I wouldn't join the Dynamos until I could see that they were okay, so I asked if they could come as well, and so the Dynamos became a 7-piece band, which was a pretty big band in those days, and that's how we got involved in that, and we actually ended up giving up our jobs and becoming full-time. But it didn't last too long with, as you can imagine, a 7-piece band, unknown, trying to make a living in the clubs in the north of England and so on. But that's where Davy met the female singer of the band, and eventually they got married. So Anne Sutherland became Anne Duff, and Davy's wife. But you know, financially it was a disaster, and Davy and Anne left first, and I stayed on a bit longer until eventually I had a family, and once my wife was expecting, I came back out of the full-time thing and went back to part-time again while we got established with the newborn. But it didn't last. I think about 2 years, 3 years, and I was back at it again. I wanted to get full-time and start making music, my main interest. And my wife was very tolerant of the whole thing, although it is a hard lifestyle. But it was, it's a passion, and I had to do it. So eventually I got my local group pulled together, and that was when we called ourselves New Release, and we were venturing as far as Granton-on-Spey, which was about 3 hours away from where we were at that time, and having, you know, weekends down there and so on. And we established a good following, and the band in the North Highlands was reasonably popular. But Davy came back, and by this time he had learned to play pedal steel guitar, and he was doing some gigs with a group in Caithness. But because of the travel and the weather, he approached me about joining our group. The rest of the group were certainly not keen on Davy joining us, but I don't know if I should say I pulled rank, but as I was the kind of driving person, I said, no, we need to have Davy in there. And that really led to what in essence was the beginnings of Colorado.
People like Hank Snow, Woody Guthrie and the original Jimmy Rogers. I wonder if they could have imagined that it would get as far as Golspie in the north of Scotland. Well, it has. It got to a group called Colorado, and if they can look down and hear them playing this song, I wonder if they smile. It's called Good-Hearted Woman.
A long time forgotten, our dreams that just fell by the way. And the good life he promised her ain't what she's living today. But she never complains of the bad times and the bad things he's done wrong. She just talks about the good times they've had and all the good times to come. She's a good-hearted woman in love with her good times man. She loves him in spite of his ways that she don't understand.
The whole thing about living in the North Highlands is, at that time, you're pretty remote. We played material that was requested by our audiences, and at that time that meant incorporating a reasonable amount of country music songs. So the group that we were calling New Release, with Davy now coming into the lineup, we played what was commercial pop plus country music repertoire, and we got kind of pigeonholed like that. And we became aware of a festival that ran at Wembley in London every Easter, which brought major names over from Nashville and the States, and we had aspirations to go to that, but it was really expensive from the North Highlands. Running in tandem with that festival was a competition, and if you took part in the competition at a local level, you could work your way through the heats to their final. So we had this plan that, you know what, maybe we, if we got through to the final, would get tickets, you know, passes to go to the main show. So with that in mind, we changed our name to something that could sound country. And Davy had a pin in the map, and we came up with Colorado, and we thought, hey, what? We're doing the competition, we can revert back to our old name once we get, if we don't make it through, so it won't matter. As it turned out, we won the local heat, and we ended up going on down to Wembley and taking part in the main competition. We didn't win. We were second. but it was enough to expose the band to a national country music audience.
I spend most every night down at Gilly's place. Black in the jack and Texas girls put a smile on my face.
And that really, it was quite funny because the locals said, "Oh, I saw your picture in the paper, you'd done really well," but they got the name wrong. And we kind of had to explain, no, we've had a name change, and we had to stick with that. And they gave us a great welcome when we got home. We were spotted by a promoter who asked if we would be interested in touring with a guy from the States who was becoming popular in the clubs in Britain. And so we decided we'd take that on. This guy was known as Boxcar Willie, and he sang train songs. It was a bit more traditional than the country music that we were into. But we had to produce the sound that he wanted as his backing group. And so we played the theatres of Britain with that, which meant that your name was now on the billboards in the towns and cities of Britain. You were playing the theatres, you were doing the local radio interviews in each place, and the exposure level had much increased.
Colorado's a good band. It's hard for a band to make it as a band. Everybody, unless it was in the rock field. In the country field, I don't know of any bands per se that have really made a hit as a band.
Don't wait too long till you come back to me in Tennessee. Tennessee, where the cotton fields in fall look like a blanket of snow. Tennessee, where the trees in the mountains turn to a forest of gold.
They're going to have a hard row to hoe. They're good musicians. They are terrific musicians. They're a good backup band. They look nice on stage. They present themselves well.
You and me in Tennessee.
For a British band, I don't know of a band that's any better than them over here. I'd say they'd have to be the tops right now of the British country bands.
In those theatres, it meant that we could play our own material for the first half of the show, and then on comes Mr. Celebrity, Boxcar Willie, and we do his thing. And that then went to, hey, this is a group that you can use when you're in Britain. So just about every other Nashville artist that was coming into the UK would use Colorado. And that was fantastic because we got to meet a lot of our heroes as well. There's a long list of people that we played with in theatres up and down Britain. I can't go through all the names now, but some of them are from my album collection when I was a kid. Slim Whitman, to which I have to say the guys all ask me, oh, is he still around? You know, because they disappeared into the mist. But we're now rubbing shoulders with all those American artists, and we're talking about going to Nashville and doing an album. So when that happened, of course, we were already well known in the music circles in Nashville because we'd done the backup jobs for all these people who were already members of the Grand Ole Opry. And so they'd say, hey, you're in town, guys, come on in and play on the Opry on Saturday. And it was as easy as that. When we're hearing stories about other people, you know, sitting on the doorstep of the Grand Ole Opry for years trying to get an opening. So yeah, I guess there's a little bit of who you know involved with that.
Thrill of the chase, the perfume and lace stirs the fire in a man
The album that we did there was called Tennessee Inspiration, and it was interesting. We never wanted to sing about missing the prairies or anything like that. We tried to hold on to our Celtic roots, and we tried to do, you know, the kind of songs of emotion that we could relate to. We had a producer for the album who much resisted the idea of using one of the songs that I'd picked up, which was a folk song essentially called The Green Fields of France, written by Eric Bogle. He really didn't want it on the album, and he'd much rather that we did a disco version of a song called Boogie Grass Saturday Night. Both songs made it onto the album with a bit of argument from myself and Davy. We managed to get The Green Fields of France on there, and it has become probably one of the most requested songs that we ever played, albeit it's not country. But that doesn't matter to us. You know, a good song was a good song. And so we decided that we would stick to that policy in general and try and record material that we could relate to and people could identify us, as opposed to just doing cover versions of other people's material.
Did the rifles fire on you as they lowered you down? Did the bugles sing the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the blues of the forest?
That kind of led me into the songwriting. And by this time, we'd achieved quite a lot of radio play. We'd managed to get into all the various countries in Europe playing at festivals, and I was now writing songs in the quiet moments that we had then.
Or are you a stranger without even a name enshrined?
It was quite difficult to introduce my songs to the rest of the guys in the group, let alone to the general public. And so I would pretend that I just found a song somewhere on an album and say, hey guys, what do you think about this? And I'd run through it and they'd kind of dress it up with all the instrumentation, and we'd have a song in the repertoire. And I might take a couple of weeks or months before I'd admit to it's mine.
As long as there's harmony in every song we write, people turn out everywhere, hear us play each night. We're still having fun like we had on day one. We'll make it on this run 'cause we're still burning.
And there were a lot of rubbish songs in that as well, I have to say, that never made the grade. But, you know, law of averages, you know, you write some stuff and you just get a feeling that it's okay. But these songs are your babies, and it's hard to let them go. And we went to Nashville to record an album, and George Hamilton IV came along, and he heard a song and he wanted to sing on it, and I said, yeah, that's fine, and it was one of my songs. And the strange thing about that song was it was a really daddy-dum simple song that was written on the back of a fag packet in no time at all. That song, the boys didn't like it, and I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about it afterwards either, but you know, there was a space in the recording time and on the album, and it worked out okay, so we put it on there. Sort of not high profile on the album, but as I wouldn't say a space filler, but one of the songs that we didn't particularly want to go out and play at the gigs. But it grew a life of its own. And the song was called Making Friends Out of Strangers. And it had a very simple message. And it got picked up by other groups and artists, and they started recording it. And when I said that, you know, your songs are like your babies, it's really hard to listen to other people singing your songs because they give it a different twist or whatever. And some very nice versions of it. And I guess there must be about 10 or 12 people now that have recorded it over the years. But George Hamilton sang with me on the original one, and he went on to become another great friend in my musical experiences as well. A real gentleman. We played at a festival in the King's Hall in Belfast, where Johnny Cash was headlining, and we were the opening act. And George Hamilton was on after us, and we were going to give him backup music. So with the problems of Ireland at the time, the schedule for getting into the festival, they were running behind, and that meant that the show needed to kick off on time when the audience weren't fully in the auditorium. So George Hamilton's in the wings with us, and he said, "Hey, you guys, you're not really so well known as me here. I've been here before. The audience aren't in there yet. You know what?" He said, "I'll go on and do my set first, and by the time I get finished my set, I guess all the audience will be there to hear you guys." And that's what he did. A real gentleman. I can't sing his praises high enough, but sadly George passed away in I think 2015. So, but a real gentleman.
Take my hand, be my friend.
So basically we were riding the crest of the wave from about 1981, I would say. The Tennessee Inspiration album was getting international airplay. We were being invited to festivals in our own right at that time, which was important. It just got better and better. But we didn't really appreciate the popularity level, and we didn't see it happening around us because we were so embroiled in the day-to-day mechanics of it all. We were more concerned about whether we had enough clean shirts and socks to do the whole tour, where you were eating and what the conditions were, and sometimes you were having to improvise on stuff like that. So the on-stage image, here's Colorado in their white suits or whatever it was at the time, was a whole different story from the traveling from one venue to another or one festival to another, the flights, the hanging around at airports, and having to make do on snacks because you were eating at ridiculous times of the day and so on and so forth. You know, there was a less glamorous side to the popularity. We kept on being surprised when people would shower compliments on us, and we thought, well, actually, you know, I'm down to my last shirt and pair of socks now, you know, and you know, they're being very nice to me and all that, but I've got other stuff to think about here, you know. So yeah, but it was at a time when if you were on TV, there were less channels on TV then, and of course you were seen by more people. And if you're on TV, you've kind of cracked it at that time, you know. So people who never spoke before were starting to speak to me at a local level. So I think we were, I say that, but we were no different. We were associating ourselves with successful people that we were working with and feeling good about that, as if it would rub off on us. I don't know. But we had a lot of laughs as a group, but you're living in each other's pockets as well. And so you have to kind of make a little quiet space as often as you can steal it. But the scale of the stuff we were doing, as I say, we didn't really appreciate it. We were back playing on the Opry in Nashville, and we didn't give it the adulation that the American country singers gave it, because it wasn't our first home of country music. It was theirs. It was another gig for us. And it was the same. We would play Wembley and have a spot on the main arena in Wembley in our own right, and that would be televised. And you were playing to 10, 15, 20,000 people a night at these festivals, you know. The thing about that festival is it duplicated itself in the following days in other major cities in Europe. And we travelled with an entourage. So, you know, you're sitting on a plane or in a bus with a whole plane full of celebrity names in the world of country music. But it's all about the little details, you know, because they get hot and tired and hungry the same way as everybody else. So you forget all that stuff. I've got a vivid memory of sitting on a flight with Jerry Lee Lewis directly opposite me, and I remember hearing his kind of wild reputation, and we're kind of soft from the Highlands and all that, so that was a curiosity to me, you know. The guy carried his own doctor with him, who was allowed to carry all sorts of medication. But that wasn't our culture. We didn't see that. You know, we were observing that stuff as we travelled. You know, it's very curious. You know, we liked a good laugh, and hey, we weren't shy of taking a dram or two, because we kind of liked our Scottish identity, and we kind of wore that on our sleeves a wee bit. So in order to defend our position, if you like, amongst all these great names of country music, we'd fly the Scottish flag and say, hey, you know, here's a good Scottish song, listen to this. And so the wee jam sessions we'd have in various places, we'd stick to our own material, and it was generally well accepted by them, and it became one of the long-standing kind of points that we tried to put across, that there is room in the world of country music for its various strands, including Celtic country music. So we were never country and western. We were always true to our own roots in the material that we did, in the same way that French Cajun music has that French influence in it, or bluegrass, or whatever strand of music it might be, you know. And I'm not sure that we ever managed to fully achieve that goal, but we put a lot of effort into working with it.
Scotland's award-winning group Colorado backing many of the top liners. Now the lads have a spot of their own, about to offer something a bit different.
Yeah, life on the road was hard at times, and you didn't want to put that on the people that you're playing to. Half the time, you know, people were looking forward to their night out. They didn't worry whether you had a cold or a flu the day before, or that you'd travelled 600 miles to get there. We were playing in Europe at the time when Alan Thompson and Finlay were with us, and we had a pretty hard trip out there. Everybody was working hard, but they were socialising hard as well. We got back into Heathrow and we picked up the vehicles for the long drive home. three of us, myself and Dado and Geordie Davidson, were in one of the vehicles, the minibus, and we were going up the M6, and Dado and I were sleeping and Geordie was driving, and then he decided that he would take the scenic route, and he drove up the embankment, and we rolled 3 times onto the hard shoulder. So nobody was too badly hurt, although Geordie was hospitalised, and I think he was probably, you know, just a blackout of some sort. So that was an event that we didn't want to relay home, so we kind of kept it quiet and move on to the next week, because you get yet another gig. We continued to play all these festivals at quite a fast rate. It meant we were away from home a lot. We played prestigious venues like the Royal Albert Hall, and the festivals we were playing, the numbers were huge, so our exposure was great across Europe. And we got to a point where we were playing in Budapest in Hungary, and there were 30,000 people at that. They took us to, it was in a former Olympic hotel, and we had the suite on the top floor. We couldn't believe the treatment, the stretch limo and all that stuff. And there were, George Hamilton was on that festival bill as well, and we ended up playing that festival pretty much the last act of the day. And we watched the numbers build up. We had no idea what it was we were there for. The manager didn't tell us. And then we realized that he'd released a single in Hungary at that time. Of course, the wall was still up in those days, so East-West thing was still in existence, and we couldn't understand the special treatment that we got, but it was because of all of that. So anyhow, we played the gig, and about 25% of the way into our set, Davy walked off stage. Which kind of left us in a big hole. So as a group, we just had to improvise and carry on. And we managed, and we got to the end of our set. George Hamilton was aware that we were one down in our lineup, and he came on and sang my Making Friends song with me. And in fact, we ended up singing, because we were having to wing it, and we ended up doing Flower of Scotland, which George knew. So 30,000 people in Budapest, and here we are singing Flower of Scotland. It was great. But we got back to the hotel, and Davy was in what I could see reasonably good health, laughing with the members of another group in the lounge, which didn't go down particularly well. So we couldn't understand what that was about, and he just said, look, you know, I wasn't feeling well, so I felt terrible. And we thought maybe it was a kind of stage fright or something. Anyhow, we did the flights home in the next day, and he clearly became quite ill on the flights home again. And by the time we arrived back home, we could see it was quite serious. He got checked out, and it was kidney failure. So that meant that Davy was now, you know, dialysis, and the conditions of playing in the group, there's no way that could happen. His father approached me and said, look, you know what, let him believe that he can get back into the group. Keep his place open for him if you can, because he needs that for morale. It was a difficult ask for me, but you know, we had to try and do that. It was hard for us to be operating as a four-piece, and we felt that we needed a fifth person. And in the weeks that followed, we talked about it, and we eventually got up to the Orkney Islands. While we were playing up there, there was a young girl who's a music teacher and played keyboards and sang, and she had aspirations to become professional, and we approached her after having a discussion about a female in the group and how our wives would feel about that. But we ended up going ahead with the decision, and so Ruby Rendell joined our lineup. That went on for about, I guess, 3 or 4 months, and it was quite a difficult acceptance for our followers who knew the group before to have a female now within that lineup.
If I needed you, would you come to me? Would you come to me for to ease my pain? If you needed me, I would come to you. I would swim the sea for to ease your pain. Well, the night's forlorn, when the morning's born, when the morning's born, with the light of love. And you miss sunrise if you close your eyes, and that would break my heart in two. If I needed you, would you come to me? Would you come to me for to ease my pain? If you needed me, I would come to you.
And about 4 months went past, and we realised that you know, it was quite difficult. I mean, I quite liked the sound that we were producing at that time, but alas, anyway, she got emotionally involved with the drummer, and they decided that they were going to leave the group. So that made it like the end of Colorado or not, because we were now down to 3 people. I spoke to Davy about that when we were home, and he kind of acted as a sounding board for me when we would get back from tours. And it was clear that he was accepting that it was unlikely he would ever come back into the lineup. So we got 2 guys from Elgin, Alan Thompson and Finlay Grant, to join us. The chemistry changed with that change because they had a slightly different culture from the original group. But the audiences seemed to accept that. So we had a new lineup, and we enjoyed quite a lot of popularity still. We managed to maintain the group, and from 1981, when the original lineup was at Wembley, we were awarded the British Country Music Association Group of the Year. And despite the changes in lineup with Ruby and then with Alan Thompson and Finlay Grant, we were still winning the Group of the Year award every year, and so that went on for a total of 9 years, which I think is a complete record. I don't think anybody is ever going to win it 9 years in succession. But The Elgin guys, they had, for their part, they had a geographical divide, so we kind of met at Inverness or Elgin and then north, you know, and they had a different take on what the group should be to the three original members, myself and Geordie Davidson and Dado Duncan. So they wanted, you know, we had the cultural thing between us as well, and it became a little them and us at one point. And I guess if you're living in each other's pockets, there are irritations. So they decided that enough was enough. They would go their own way. So we were due for change again. And, you know, we were again deliberating the merits of change and whether to call it a day or whether to take up the challenge. For me, the passion of playing prevailed, and I would do whatever it takes. And so we came to the conclusion that maybe we should find a couple of guys who have got no background baggage. They're reasonably good musicians, but of the same culture. And we identified two people in Brian Coggle and Alan Murphy. And so, again, we were back at a five-piece band, and there was an image change where we dropped the white suits and the formalities of stage appearance that we had before and became much more colourful and glamorous. And there was an added bonus in that Brian Coggle was an excellent button-keyed accordion player as well as a pedal steel guitarist. So we were able to wear that Scottish identity on an international level. So we'd go now to festivals and we'd have a button-keyed accordion playing jigs and reels within part of our set, which kind of suited us, and the audience warmed to that. So we were enjoying a resurgence in popularity. It just got better and better, and it took us all over the map, and that was a fantastic era. So in the midst of all of this, Davy is still keeping a watchful eye on what we're doing and offering advice where he can. But unfortunately, by this stage of the health, he's gone through a transplant, which was successful, but he's unfortunately lost his sight. So that was, it was kind of sad, but he laughed it off, and you know, he was never out of my house when I was home, wanting to know about everything that we did. And it was quite a difficult thing, you know, knowing the background that we had. But I had to keep going anyway. So we carried on. We were enjoying the resurgence, as I say, of popularity. But you know, we were playing in Germany and Switzerland, and in those days there was no mobile phones, and I called home from a call box, and sadly Davy passed away just the night before. So we were all completely devastated. It was really sad.
I spend most every night down at Willie's place. Jack in the black and Texas girls put a smile on the face. When they're dancing to that Texas swing, Lord, how they hold you close. Tennessee whiskey and Texas women at best with the most. Tennessee whiskey and Texas women, either one of them will set your head a spinning. all wear western boots. Once you love a Texas girl, you ain't never gonna turn her loose. That Tennessee sipping whiskey brings out the man in men, and Texas is the only place where every girl's a 10. Tennessee.
By the time we reached probably 1987, 1988, it was a long time for a group to exist, and we were pretty well established in the British country music scene and in Europe as well to an extent. The lineup that we had, the drummer Alan Murphy, for purely domestic reasons, decided that he could no longer continue, and we replaced him with a lad from Hopeman called Willie Anderson. Willie was a comical guy, and he brought a lot of sunshine into the group. And he had a big personality, so we kind of enjoyed that, and we had a really good run with that lineup. But living in each other's pockets, eventually we're starting to question, where does it go from here? By that time, I'd probably written and recorded quite a lot of my own songs on the albums that we'd done. And the yearning for getting into the comfort zone of your own domestic environment became more appealing again. From my own point of view, that meant I had, by this time, 4 of a family who were all musically inclined as well. And not through my teaching, but just being surrounded in that environment, they'd become very good musicians. So my 2 sons and 2 daughters could all play musical instruments, and they played at a local level themselves. When I reached that point that the band was looking and getting a bit tired in its performances because it was playing on yesteryear a little bit, I think we were facing the point where it was time to call it a day. And so we agreed to disband, and the way that we did it was we had a diary with festival dates in Europe dotted here and there, and we decided that we'd only do those and forget all the touring gigs. So we stopped that, and it was a phase out. In that phase out, my appetite for music was still there, and so my 2 sons joined me. And we played some local gigs, and within no time at all, the bass player from Colorado, Dado, joined us as well. So we had another group going at a local level, and we were back at square one, and we kind of enjoyed that. But it was clear I could never shake off the Colorado identity. With Dado and myself visually in this group. And so people would come to, we'd play local dances and weddings, and people would come along and they'd say, "Oh, you're Colorado." You know, well, okay. And I thought I could shake it off, but no. I don't know even why I probably wanted to. I think it was to give some credibility to my 2 sons. But they knew all the Colorado material, and people requested it. And so before too long, we were going out and doing gigs and bigger gigs again as the Jacks, with a Colorado repertoire effectively. Because I only do what I do. And that worked out a treat. And we were starting to enjoy this. because we were in the position where we could say no to stuff as well. And we ended up taking that group to Australia twice, I think, and it was great. And we ended up in a recording studio doing an album, playing in Europe again, but only selectively. And you know, that was important to keep the balance. So you know, as long as you knew you were going back to the domestic environment again at home, that was great.
It's the dance as old as tears, round and smooth like a river. We'll survive hand in hand cross the divide. Love will deliver. Love, I know we were up and now we're down. Can't you see it's just a game played by the years? While in the night the moth and candlelight still dance the dance as old as tears. It's the dance as old as tears, round and smooth like a river. We'll survive hand in hand cross the divide. Love will deliver. So share your heart with me, light and dark with me, and I in return I give my all. For you I yearn to dance the dance as old as tears, round and smooth like a river. We'll survive hand in hand cross the divide. Love will deliver.
That went on for quite a lot of years, until we got to a point where, you know what, I don't really want to play more dance halls and weddings where I've got to do cover versions of popular songs, because I had this whole repertoire of my own, and I felt that it was hard to play my material in a social situation where people were being invited irrespective of who the group were to an event. So I decided, no, guys, you know, it's time out for me. And it didn't last. I'm now sitting in a room with a guitar at home playing and thinking, where could I find an audience that would listen to my songs? And after about 3 or 4 years of doing nothing other than sitting in that room and playing, somebody approached me and said, you really should go out and do it. And I thought, well, okay. So I said, well, okay, go and play in Court Theatre in Inverness and you'll get a sit-down audience and you can see how you get on. And I tried that. And it was, it sold out and it was great. And we went back in the following year and pretty much did the same thing again and captured it on film as well, which, you know, kept the moment alive.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Well, I was standing by my window on a cold and cloudy day. Tennessee whiskey and Texas women, you're the one that set your head spinning. Once you had them, you can't forget them. Tennessee whiskey and Texas women. They melt into the jeans, and they all wear western. All life is a garden. Your thoughts are the seed. You can grow roses, or you can grow weeds. Choose well in your garden the things you would grow, and always remember the way, looking for a better way for me. Oh, I'm driving my life away, looking for a sunny day.
While I'm sitting in this room at home, I'm writing songs, and my family are saying to me, come on, you know, you really need to get out and do something. And I, for my part, I mean, my wife was very good. She had this filtering process with my songs of which ones were good and which ones were not, because I'd write them, put the slip of paper in my jeans, and then she'd wash the jeans if it was a rubbish song and the song got lost. But I ended up getting into a studio to save losing the ones that were half decent, I think. So we put down an album which was effectively an acoustic album of the stuff. And it was a completely self-indulgent album, because for the first time I was able to record an album of songs that I wanted to do, and it didn't have to have a commercial dimension to it. So it was pure self-indulgence, capturing my own stuff. But when we got down to doing it, the guy in the studio said, you know what, he said, people are going to want to hear that. So I had to lighten it slightly, but we ended up putting it out, and that was a Choices album, which was essentially my own material.
Are you going out the same way you came in? No matter who you know or where you've been, no matter who you are, Skid Row Joe or Superstar, you're going out the same way you came in. You were born into this world without a thing, and you're going out as naked as you came. You can drive a coupe, build, own a mansion on a hill. Makes no difference when St. Peter calls your name.
And that's pretty much what's taken me to this point. As I sit here, I'm asking myself, you know, where is the cut-off point? And I almost tried to give it up about 3 or 4 times already and failed miserably. And I have to say, I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. But it's nice to be able to do it at my pace now.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for taking the time and the trouble to turn out here tonight. It really made a very old man very happy. Thank you all very much for that. I am so honored, I really am. Why don't you just, if you can, stay on your feet. Hold the hand of the person next to you. Making friends out of strangers, making more new friends wherever we play. Making friends out of strangers. So take my hand, be my friend. Foreign lands and different come the time when all are equal, everyone a friend will be, making friends out of strangers, making more new friends wherever we play, making friends out of strangers. Take my hand, be my friend. Many countries, many stories, but may the music never end. The melody of wandering minstrels, living life, just making friends, making friends out of strangers, making more new friends wherever we play, making friends out of strangers. Take my hand and be my friend. Thank you all very much. I hope we made some friends tonight. Until we meet again, God bless. Good night, and thank you all very much.